It's Thursday, 28th of April. This is the first of the Wingman online events. And so thank you very much for coming along today. I'm very pleased to have Rob Goddard along here, a very, very good friend of mine from the last couple of years, who we've been at speaking events over the years. And we've had some fascinating discussions around some of the challenges of small businesses and growing, etc. So it's been very, very useful. So I'll introduce Rob, and then we'll get stuck into, it's going to be a very informal discussion between myself and Rob. I'll sort of lead it by asking questions, but I want it to be a very informal one. I'm going to do about 30, 40 minutes, something like that. And then when we get to the end, I'm going to open the floor to questions. We've got a nice, small, select group here. So for those who can, obviously, I'll just come to you and ask the questions so that Rob can see you ask the questions rather than doing it through the chat facility. So, Rob Goddard, mentor, investor, and international speaker. Not just a speaker, an international speaker. Rob has over 20 years of helping thousands of business leaders and entrepreneurs grow their companies and achieve their long-term goals and ambitions. He's recently sold his business and now focuses on helping other businesses owners find their own attractive exit, achieving their magic number, and so finish one chapter in their lives and start a new one, whenever that may be. Rob's live talks, webinars, and mentoring support help people to navigate the sometimes tricky path of exiting a business. And I've heard Rob speak many times, and I know it's fascinating, whether I'm not deciding to sell my company at the moment, but I know it's really an interesting subject. Rob has also, this is where you wave your books now, Rob has also written several books and is currently working in his autobiography, Trying to Retire. And I suspect some of that might come out because interesting, trying to retire or trying to sell your business. One of the ones I found really fascinating, the 11 Commandments and 7 Cardinal Sins of Selling a Business. That one. Very chunky, chunked down, so useful information reading that. I found that really interesting. In some ways, not because I was selling my company, but some of the things that you talk about, and we'll talk about in more detail, Rob, are relevant to you just in running your business anyway. So just in some ways, good practice. So, Rob, welcome. Thank you very much for coming along and joining us today.
Lovely. We've shared the platform a few times, haven't we? Both in this country and in Dubai, I think was the last time.
Just before the lockdown, wasn't it? It was just before lockdown.
Yeah. No, so it's good to team up together, and great to be joined by an intimate group here. See the people's names on the list there. So yeah, we'll have a good time this morning. Hopefully, my intention is to try and transmit and pass over knowledge, thoughts, ideas, tips, trade secrets even about growing and selling a business.
So, selling a business, how did you get into selling companies? I mean, you don't sort of listen to a person come to a school and say, you should come and sell businesses, and you go, I'll do that, and you go and do it straight away. So what was your journey?
Well, I was good at geography at school, so I wanted to be a cartographist. So my mum was very pleased with that. And then I failed my O-level geography, so I went into banking after I left college.
As you do.
Yeah, as you do. Yeah. My mum was still very pleased because she saw me being a bank manager with oak panel offices. And so I spent 20 years with NatWest Bank, and then I saw the light towards the end of the 90s. And I left NatWest after 20 years, and we sold up and we went and lived in a commune in California, and I ran a food ministry for a church, because you didn't know the missing piece, did you, Rory?
No, I didn't.
Oh yeah. We sold up, and my boys, the twin boys, were 2 years old at the time, so young family, and we lived in a commune with 90 other people, feeding 700-800 Hispanics a week. So that needed good team skills, working with different nationalities, many miles away. And spent a year there, and then came back and decided one thing I didn't want was to work in banking. So I worked for a marketing company, telesales actually, bloody hard work, hated it. But I spent 4 years there learning a new skill, which is how to approach people who didn't know you were calling. So I really started at the bottom again. And then I got headhunted by an M&A firm locally who'd seen what I'd done with this telesales company and said, how would you like to be general manager and grow our business? It was 1.5 million turnover at that time, and I took it to 15 million as GM over those 7 years. And then there was a couple of things I couldn't change, and the shareholders of the business were reluctant to make those changes. So I went off and did my own thing with their support, actually, and started as a one-man band with some seed funding, and started an M&A advisory firm to help people sell their businesses one day. And that's the business you referred to, Rory, that I sold up from last year. That's a multi-million-pound business, one of the market leaders in what it does. I'm still a minority shareholder because there's a future for the business, very much so. So I still wanted to go on that journey, but I don't have any operational involvement at all. I'm just a shareholder. So I've moved from being an operator of a business to an investor, and that's a major change.
You mentioned there was a couple of things that they didn't really want to do, whatever. Without, what were those little niggles or little scratches that you wanted to do that you felt was worthwhile going to start a business?
The conversion rate of how many businesses you take on to the ones that you sell was quite low, because there wasn't really any pre-qualification of whether those businesses could be sellable. And it was something that rankled with me, so much so that I left the job and thought I'd try and do it the other way around, invert the pyramid in a sense, or invert it. So that particular company are no different to the industry. I don't know whether the people on the call today realize, but only less than one in five businesses sell in this country, which is a shocking failure rate. That's because most businesses are not ready to sell, and certainly not at the price and the value that the owner is looking for. So I've spent the last 12, 13 years trying to get that message across to business owners not only in the UK, but overseas as well, that there needs to be quite a lot of preparation in a business. And quite often that means growing it, because the figure that the owners are looking to sell for usually bear no relation to the current P&L and balance sheet. So there's a lot of work involved.
Because obviously, every owner thinks their business is worth £100 million. And when they're told it's only worth 10, they're a bit disappointed. But there you go. So you're touching on some points there. It's like it might seem simple. You just sell a company, just like selling an item, whatever. But I suspect it's a bit more complicated than that. And you've alluded to some of the points with regards to some of the due diligence you do beforehand. You've alluded to sort of the expectations of the business owner, etc. There must be some interesting dynamics at work when you're trying to sell a business.
Yeah, particularly if it's a founder. So someone who started the business, it's like having a child starting a business. You're nurturing it, growing it. It becomes a teenager, a troublesome teenager. Then at some point you're looking to sell that child because you want to crystallize that investment, that blood, sweat and tears. And it's very personal. Any owner manager on this call, it will resonate with them. It's part of you. And then one day you'll be looking to sell it. I mean, the alternative to selling your business is dying in office. And I wouldn't recommend that as a strategy. But certainly it's an emotion. People often think selling a business is a financial transaction. It's actually more of an emotional transaction for the owner. It's more emotion than financial. They think it's financial because there's a chunk of money and everyone wants to be a millionaire or multi-millionaire off the back of selling their business. Why wouldn't you? But it isn't about the money, I've discovered. It's very personal. And that actually can affect the success or the outcome of the transaction, because some business owners get entrenched with emotional baggage that they're carrying.
So one of the facts that I found fascinating, you just mentioned before about less than 1 in 5 sell currently across the whole of the country. But what impressed me from the talks we had before with the work that you did with your previous company is your due diligence was an interesting factor. So you would actually say, no, we won't take you on because we don't think you're suitable, or we're going to get decent leverage out of trying to sell your business. So what were sort of things that you tried to do, and what did the numbers turn around to be that went from, only selling 1 in 5?
One of the key things is to get the magic number from the owner. And they're usually really coy, because when I ask them, they normally laugh nervously. And then they say, well, I was hoping you could value my business, Rob. And I say, well, no, I'm not talking about valuing your businesses. I'm talking about what is the capital. The magic number is your magic number. So what is the capital sum you need to finish one chapter in your life and start a new one? That's not a business valuation. That's what you need it to be worth. And I can quite happily give an indication on value and price of a business based on financials. That's not a problem after all these years. What I'm interested in is what the business owner needs it to be worth. And there's usually quite a big gap. And once we've established what the gap is, I'll say, well, you've got one or two things. You can either lower your aspiration on what your business is probably worth today, or you can do the hard journey, which is to grow it, actually become less one of the things that affects value is owner reliance. The business the owner is too much of an integral part of the business. And the one thing you're not selling when you're selling a business is the owner, because they're moving on.
I can empathize with that, because obviously as a named person running Wingman, one of the things I'm very conscious of is to make sure that I'm not completely synonymous and I'm completely, the business is reliant totally on me. Otherwise, at a future date, I can't grow and I can't expand. And if such times I do decide I want to sell, and I can't sell it, because as soon as I leave, it becomes, worthless. Well, not 100%.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the honest conversations I have up front with someone who's looking to sell the business, I'll give them a view as to whether it's sellable or not. It may not be saleable at all. Not all businesses are saleable. And owner reliance is one of the key factors. The other thing is to say, look, these are the things that need ironing out in the business before you go to market. Please don't go in front of potential buyers, because what they'll do is they'll find things to chip on price, the things that you don't do right, the things that are not that represent a high degree of risk. They will use that against you. So better to spend time now ironing out the problems, growing the business, getting it shipshape, making sure your senior leadership team doesn't include you, that you're more strategic than operational. So I know we're touching on your area of expertise, Rory, but it's having an honest conversation. And I have lost business over the years where people they've said, oh, that's interesting you should say that. No one else has told us that, Rob. And then they go to a competitor and sign up with them, pay them 2, 3, 4, 5 grand a month retainer. And then a year later, I get a call from the same owner saying it didn't work. And I said, well, I told you that a year ago. And I also told you why it wouldn't work. Then they said, well, would you mind, could we remarket the business through you? And I say, well, now you've made it much harder. Because usually they want you to do it for free because they've spent money with someone else. So I said, no. You're better off spending the next 2 to 3 years preparing the business for sale, getting it shipshape, and then let's have a conversation.
So, out of interest, then, what I took away from the talk you talk about is you're much more stringent with regards to your DD beforehand, and you only accept those that you think will sell. And so, what did the numbers turn around to? I believe it flip-flopped, did it?
Yeah. So we've reversed the national average, which we sell 3 out of every 4 we take on.
Yeah,
which compared to the one in 5 in the UK.
Yeah, and people can say, well, you pick and choose, which ones you do, but at the end of the day, you still are successful. Yeah, because it makes life easier for both.
Well, we're more successful, but more importantly, we haven't let down the client. And, going back to my earlier point, it's an emotional transaction. There's nothing worse than going to market, not getting the offers that you expected and it not happening. You feel bruised, disillusioned. And sometimes, with some business owners, the sale of their business is their pension. They haven't got anything else substantive to help them in older age. Their financial security is going to come from the sale of the business, which is why I passionately believe that we should be honest in our industry. And sadly, not all providers, M&A advisory firms, are honest, to be quite frank. They just want the retainers.
So out of interest, because it's quite interesting, of the 1 in 4 that you don't manage to sell, what are the sort of reasons that that they don't sell through?
Yeah, number one is changing financial forecasts. So what they've put in the sales prospectus as a forecast for this year's outturn doesn't materialize. One could say,
why is that? Is that a bit ambitious?
That's a nice way of putting it, Rory. Some might say there are others that are deluded. Some might say that they just over-egged the pudding because they knew their business was for sale, so they thought they'd attract potential interest with some big numbers. There's all sorts of things. Sometimes the business owner has tried to sell the business themselves because they want to save money and not use a broker or an M&A advisory firm. But the trouble with that is it's like having a second job selling your business. And of course, what happens is inevitably you take your eye off the ball. So I'd always recommend you use a good advisor to do the bulk of the work so that you can concentrate on hitting your numbers that you've forecasted within the business.
Yeah. Some of the interesting ones I remember you talked about were things, the emotional bit you talked about before, that came across very strongly because you've had how many people? Several that pulled out because of feeling guilty or remorse.
Oh, yeah, seller's remorse. So they changed their mind. So yeah, it's the reverse. Thanks for the prompt. They get towards the end, they've got an offer or two that's just in their sweet spot, maybe even more than their original magic number, and then they pull out. And it's because selling a business comes from the heart. It's an emotional transaction, as I said a couple of times. They change their mind because, and I've spoken to a friend of mine who's a psychologist, and he said it's the fear of death. When we sell a business, the next thing that we think about is retirement, whatever that means to you as an individual. And the next thing after retirement is death. So there are some business owners walking around out there, I'm sure they're not represented here this morning, that think they can put death off by putting off the sale of their business. It's a weird logic, but it's out there. Yeah, I mean, there are some things that people have done in the past. I mean, one of them, I think you've heard this when I've spoken before a few years ago, criminal conviction. Guy was a stalker. He did 6 months inside. He ended up being on a lady's backseat of her car without her knowing. Now that came up in due diligence because there's a lot of things on the internet and it's very hard to get them removed. So I guess it comes down to disclosure. Sometimes part of that 1 in 4 is irregular tax or irregular, unorthodox, I should say, transactions that business has had. It might be tax related. It might be that they've had some sort of scheme set up where they're channeling revenue and profits through a Panama trust company. These things come up to bite one in the backside eventually. So there can be a colourful past to the business and a colourful past to the owner.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
You know, that's this. I can never tire listening to your talks. I always pick up other little nuggets of information. And I can empathise with that whole context. I'm not in the position of selling the business now, but I do know that I've spent the last 12, 13 years building my business up, and I know how I feel about it. And if I suddenly sold it and let somebody else run my baby, I can completely, you know, empathise with that sense, that feeling. So we flip-flop it around because it's quite interesting, because one of the talks I remember we did before was somebody that you know quite well, Philip Delisle, who actually sort of comes it from the opposite side. He's done angel type stuff and various things. So it's always fascinating hearing it from the point of view of what is he looking from if people want you know, you to buy something. So
yeah,
what are the main things that buyers are looking for if they're going to buy a company?
Yeah, well, I can. Yeah, I know Philip, as you know, I know Philip very well. We've worked together on a number of projects. I've also bought a business a couple of months ago, an accountancy firm, multi-million-pound accountancy firm, had some pressures and needed some things changing. So I can speak from a buyer's perspective as well. What they're looking for, I'm talking generics just to sort of be helpful to get some key themes over. They're looking for a business where what they're being presented with is truthful. So that means numbers and also things that are said by the seller, material things that stand up to scrutiny. No one's going to buy anything from you if they think you're dishonest, including a business. No chance. They're going to walk. They're going to walk. Number two, the financials need to be robust. So the financial reporting needs to stand up to some scrutiny from a third party. Not all accounts do. And I don't just mean the statutory accounts that we file every year at Companies House. I mean management accounts. They're looking for management accounts. If you don't have them as a business, it's going to be very hard to sell them. Management accounts are the current sort of progress in the current financial year. And some business owners don't use them, don't have them. They just look at the bank account to see if they're going to make a spend one day. There's no budgeting. So buyers are looking for reliable forecasting and budgeting on from the target business. And I think also they also want to understand, when is the current owner going to exit stage left? I have touched on a couple of times owner reliance being quite a barrier to selling a business. If there isn't a senior management team that's not an owner, if the owners are the senior management team, then you've got managers below that. That's a difficult entity to sell. So one way to bridge it is for the current owners to stay on for 2 or 3 years. But of course, some of the sale price will be dependent on future performance. So that's risky for the seller, good for the buyer. Also, the buyer's thinking, well, do I want to work with this person or these people that currently own it? You know, do I like them? Do I like them? Could I work with them? If the answer is no, they'll move on. So there's a combination of things that buyers are looking for. They're looking for cash flow. They're looking for sustainable earnings. So if you've got a business that has, say, 3-year contracts with most of its major clients, that is quite an attractive proposition to a buyer, because you've got long-term sustainable, reliable revenues coming from those clients because they're under contract. So that's highly prized by acquirers. Let's be frank, but sellers want to sell their business for as much as possible. Believe it or not, buyers want to pay as little as possible, particularly up front, and they want it spread over the never. So they're quite wide apart, which is why you need someone to act in the middle to find some common ground. But yeah, those are a few.
Yeah. Now there's quite a few there. Now you mentioned one of the issues, the challenges you've got with a business owner, MD or whatever, and you know, just starting to delve into the sort of to my side of world of things. One assumes that as a seller, if you know you've got a good management team, that must be a more attractive proposition to a buyer than having a team that's not, you know, a solid, dependable, and you know, delivering whatever. And the dynamics of that with the boss, if you've got a boss who does everything and the management team just basically do that bidding, all these sort of things. There must be an interesting dynamic you come across when you're trying to sell a business from the point of view of the leadership team. Yeah,
definitely. If you've got a business where effectively you've made yourself redundant as the owner from the day-to-day running, that is perfect to achieve an optimum sale price. So actually, you don't interfere, you don't get involved day to day. Not all roads lead to you as the owner. That actually you've empowered, you've delegated, and you've upskilled the senior leadership team. There is a difference on dipping into your world, I know, Rory, between management and leadership. And sometimes business owners confuse the two. I say, well, if you drop down dead tonight, what does the business do tomorrow? And they say, oh, well, I've got so-and-so as a manager. No, I said, no, leadership. How is the business going to be driven forward? Because that's what, again, an acquirer is looking for, is where is the growth potential and who's going to deliver it? And middle managers may or may not be able to do that. What you need is a powerhouse or a team, ideally, of directors that are staying on. And they need to feel that they've got the authority and the skill base in order to deliver the numbers.
So can you quantify the impact on having a good or bad team on, say, the value of the business?
Yeah, I mean, it can make it unsaleable. And the worst example, or it could be a minimal price. I know that because there are distressed businesses out there, not only financially, but ones that struggle without the owner being present, and maybe the owner gets ill. But it could make it unsaleable. At the very least, you're going to take a big hit on price, because what any acquirer is going to say is, look, you haven't invested in the leadership team or management team, or both are certainly not where they should be. You haven't invested in them. You haven't trained them. You haven't taken them through a process of growing them and developing them. I've got to do that now. If I were to buy your business, that's going to cost me time and money. So that's fine. I'm prepared to do that. But you're going to take a hit on your sale price. And I've put it very frankly, but that's what they're saying. They tend to smile as they're saying it and use softer language, but that's the tenor of what they're saying. So you're either going to sell at a big discount, or you can't sell it at all, worst case scenario. So it's really, really important to get that leadership and management working effectively, so that you can basically step back from the operational, and that as the owner, you're looking strategically and you're helping to deliver the longer term direction and whatever.
You mentioned the difference between management and leadership. So from your perspective, especially when you're looking at trying to sell a business, from your experience, what do you think makes a good leader then?
That's a big question, isn't it?
It's a very simple question to answer.
Isn't it just?
Yeah.
There's a number of qualities. One of them's decision making, actually. The ability to make decisions, and often in an SME scenario, quickly, because time could be detrimental, or procrastination can kill a business. So definitely the ability to be decision maker, and that comes out of confidence. Also, with leaders, to see the longer term goal, where most of the people around you, and most of the people that you employ, don't have that longer term vision. You've got to be inspiring, because there's no point having a group of people if they don't follow you. So you've got to have a good array of interpersonal skills. And I found this with salespeople, actually, in the 40 years I've been working mainly in sales. The ability to listen. It's quite easy, particularly for confident alpha type characters, to feel they've got all the answers. And the enlightened leader actually will go to the troops and say, come with an incisive question or three, but then listen to the responses. And not that you do everything you're told, but you bring it into your own thinking. And I think that's very enlightened leadership.
So you've mentioned that as well, and you mentioned companies going in distress and various things, and I'm sure you've had plenty of experience of that. And so, coming around to the title of the talk was about adversity. I'm sure you come across various business that are very optimistic and they want to sell, but you've gone into it doing your due diligence and you're finding out some interesting home truths. So, how do you see? How do you find out the fact that the company is in either distress or trying to overcome adversity? Because sometimes the person at the top doesn't see this in the same way. So how do you identify that? And what do you think are the best ways of trying to overcome that?
So it's a really good question. Invariably, the business seller doesn't tell you the truth, and that's the hard reality. They put a gloss on it. It's a bit like selling a second-hand car where it's going to fail an MOT. but you don't share that with potential buyers that come round to your house to look to buy it. So it's incumbent on the investor or the acquirer to ask the right questions. So one of the questions, there's a company I came across in recent months, very low net margin, 3%, has been making a loss in recent times. But before that, even in their best year, made 3% net profit on a couple of mil turnover. And that, so that as a buyer, that makes you think, well, why? If that's the best year and it's quite a fine net margin, why? And so it's about asking those questions. What they didn't know, this particular company, because I asked a question, I said, well, who are your best clients? What does good look like, you know, financially? They don't know because they never kept statistics or any information on whether they were making money or not from their clients. And I found out by being persistent, found out that over half their clients, they didn't make any money on at all, which is why you only make the 3% net margin. Some of them were very profitable, others, shockingly, big deficit. Now, that's a really good example of being able to use information or finding headline information and then doing a drill down, which is what any buyer is going to do. They're not going to just accept a superficial response from the seller. So businesses that are distressed, it's incumbent on the acquirer to ask the right questions. People talk about you know, beware of the seller, but you can beware of the buyer as well. It works. There's two ways. I think. Yeah. So I think that's a good starting point. Is to when I look at businesses, because I probably see 6 or 7 pitch decks a week as an investor. They're all really glossy, but they actually, most of them miss the key point, which is how I'm going to treble my money in the next 3 years. And also, what are the problems? They're not very honest in their document because they think it's a sales and marketing thing. It's quite good, and I would encourage people to share the problems that they've got in a way to say, if you were to come on board to buy the business, these are the quick wins for you, things that we haven't got round to changing, or so I think it's the way it's positioned.
So just expanding more on that whole thing, you know, we just come out of a lockdown. I don't really want to talk about lockdown per se and the challenges, but like anything else, companies go through, you know, phases of good times and bad times. And I always tend to find from my experience that when you have good times and you've got spare cash, that actually business owners and management teams don't actually spend the money in the right place and the right times on their most important asset, which from my perspective is resource, which is people, such that when you do go into times of adversity, guess what? You're not ready for it. And have you seen examples of that from when you're trying to sell business? I'm sure it must be all the time.
Pretty much, it's pretty frequent. And where I see it is when I look at their detailed P&L, and you look at the training and development or learning and development budget line, and it's diddly squat compared to what they might be spending on dividends for themselves. And I think there needs to be a wake-up call for some business owners to actually readdress their priorities, because you can take cash out now by way of a dividend and have a good lifestyle business, but what about spending less on yourself and more on your team, which ultimately, longer term, are going to deliver the capital value in the sale of your business? So I think there is something that we can learn as business owners to perhaps invest in our people more, and it's more than just having an incentive scheme or a perk box. It's about them and skilling them up.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Well, I'm going to ask one or two more questions, and I'm going to come whizzing around all the guests on things and getting you to ask a question directly of Rob or myself, such that you can ask us a question more specific to what you were hoping to get out of the session today. So I was going to finish off with in all the experience you've had, and obviously the theme of today was trying to get some sense of, it's all fine and well being great and you can sell your company and make lots of money and go and retire, and obviously death being the next thing on the agenda. But you know, the from myself, the discussions that we've had, hearing you talk, and what I've been trying to do with my business clients in my businesses that I'm involved with, is trying to make sure the environment is conducive to everybody being able to perform at their best ability. And in some ways, if you get that for what you're trying to do, you're going to have more chance of trying to be able to sell a business for what it's more likely what you want it to be worth from. So just in wrapping up from your perspective, then what would be the one piece of advice you'd like to share from all your experience that you would hand to all the people that are on the audience today that you think would stand in good sense? You know, it's your experience selling businesses, but what would it be in the context of, if not overcoming adversity, but, you know, when trying times, difficult times, what are the things that you suggest would be the ideal thing?
I think getting the troops together and aligned with the direction that you've set as the owner is crucial. Because that comes over to buyers and acquirers and investors. They can see that they can physically experience high staff morale, the way that staff or senior teams speak about the business and their role within it. So I think there is this very common pitfall as business owners. When we have companies, quite often people have a silo mentality. They just work within their very small sphere that they're responsible for or been told what to do. And I think we're missing a trick, really, as business owners, is that if we can get people aligned with a central strategy and focus, that is a very high performing team. People are working together. That will enhance the value of the business. Not that you're necessarily going to sell it tomorrow, but it's a bloody sight better working environment for everyone.
Yeah. It's interesting you say just getting everybody and getting them aligned. I spend half my life trying to get business owners and teams trying to do that all the time.
I bet.
I mean, you know, the standard old thing is that what I've told them my vision, I've told them our strategy, you know, they should know. I hear that so many times. There's a great story telling my friend of mine who was CEO of a large company, and they just bought over a competitor, and he was subsumed into it, so he had a year workout. And from his point of view, he's saying that all my people in the business, they all know what we're trying to do and everything this. And eventually they sort of managed him out because he was being a bit of a problem child, as they tend to be when you work out your time. And the new CEO went in there. They put in somebody that they wanted to put in there. And in the first 3 weeks, she went round to 75% of the stores that they had around the country. And the overriding comment that came back was that she had seen more people in that first 3 weeks than the owner had in the previous 20 years.
Wow.
And his methodology of trying to get everybody aligned around him was just sending out emails and telling him what the strategy of the business was. That was his idea.
Yeah,
so good leadership, you know.
Yeah, telling. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, right. I'm going to go around. Cracky, that's way out of my thing. And I've got a couple of questions. I'm going to go around a couple of questions I put in the chat, but I'm going to come to people actually visibly shortly. So Phil has asked, any advice, tips for business owners who have been getting their business ready for sale for a number of years, only to be hit by exceptional events, e.g. credit crunch and pandemic, which is always going to be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. So as a general principle, sell on the up, don't sell on the down. So if your numbers are going the wrong way, please don't think about selling it, because you're going to be really disappointed. Unless you've got a very low aspiration for your business. So it's better to sell on the up, which is actually takes some courage, because you don't know. There is a temptation when the numbers are doing this upwards to not sell. You think, well, next year will be better. The year after will be even better than that. But there's a trap there. So that's a general principle. I think the other comment I would make is there are business owners out there that don't have contingency planning. They don't have a plan B. They don't think about, well, what if? They've gone down almost like a sort of focused, blinkered approach. And that can make your business less robust for the things that can come up that can... we do know about financial crisis, because every 7 or 8 years we have a recession. So I mean, these aren't surprises, because you just have to tabulate at the last 100 years. Pandemics is a bit different, but I know a lot of businesses, quite a number of businesses, that benefited from the pandemic, and those are situations where the owners pivoted. They changed something or some things about the business. They were more flexible and agile, and actually rode the wave of the pandemic. And they weren't PPE companies, or Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like anything else. What I tend to find is that if you don't invest in, as we talked before, in your people during the good times, if you do get hit by the bad times, you'll be in a much worse place to get through it. Now, exceptional circumstances, there's always a situation where you can never avoid there being a bit of a downturn. But I guarantee you that if you get the team right and the people in the teams right, you'll have a more greater chance of getting through any downturn than you would do if you hadn't. And of course, if you're getting a downturn, that's the worst time to find out, because it's too late anyway. Right, I'm just going to go around the room. So, Russell, you're always one for asking lots of good questions. So, do you want to ask Rob and myself any questions?
Well, to be honest, it's more of an observation, if that's okay, because I was listening very intently to what you guys were saying. And it really impressed me in a way, because I treated myself to another copy of the book called Barbarians at the Gates. I read it years ago. I started to reread it, and much of the stuff that you guys have been talking about is illustrated fundamentally in that book, because excuse a small lapse into the vernacular on a Thursday morning, at one point, with all these people involved in the world's biggest leverage buyout and all kinds of junk bonds flying around and all that kind of stuff, some degree of due diligence. At the end of the day, it came down to a urinating competition between the various parties as to what side of the advertisement in the Wall Street Journal their names would appear. So all that good practical stuff went out the window, and it ended up in essence around ego. And the reason why I mention that is because, as Rory might remember, my world is construction and property, and teams play a large part in that. But it's a terribly adversarial industry or sector, and ego predominates without a doubt. You guys talked about the ability to listen. Well, that's not prevalent in the construction industry. In all cases, it has to be said. You talked about honesty and openness. Pretty absent on occasions, it has to be said as well. And Rory, you talk about people. We always, as you might remember, we always preach the mantra that the right people are your most important asset. And you're right, in as much as that's fine when everything's fine, dandy, and swimming, and people making lots of money and lots of plaudits. When things aren't going so well, then that's even more important. So, sorry, that wasn't a question, but it's more an observation and a reflection.
No, brilliant. Thank you, Russ. Any comments, Rob? I mean, I agree with everything you said.
Yeah. I mean, I've been responsible for over 350 business sales in my 20 years, and over 90% of my clients are male, and they're usually alpha male. And ego, you're right, ego can hamper a deal. In fact, it can finish it off, actually. And it's usually over the detail. Usually they can agree the main planks with a potential buyer, but it's the detail, like the Aston Martin DB9s that they wanted free with the deal on completion day, my client. And this is a 19.1 million transaction. And they were arguing the toss about a DB9, second-hand as well, because he wanted to go to the Nürburgring after he'd sold the business and race it. So I would agree with you, Russell. Ego can scupper a deal, in my experience. And sadly, my experience is male ego.
Yeah,
very true.
Mine too. Thank you, chaps.
Thanks, Russell.
Pleasure. Thank you. Nigel, have you got a question for Rob and myself?
Yeah, I do have one for Rob. A couple of observations and a question. I've never been an owner selling a business, but I've been an employee when business had been sold. And so some of the comments you were making about inflating the sales forecast, because I'm commercial, so inflating the sales forecast. Yeah, I've seen that, and people got fired for that. I've seen another one that the last payment, it was the last stage payment, was withheld because they had some questions when they got about the books after they bought it. So all you've said. And so the company I work for now, so you're similar to your world, Rory. I work for a psychometric test publisher, not one of the ones you've got on your website though.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. But we operate a channel model. So we don't sell direct to any of our clients. We sell through resellers. And one of my resellers in Germany is currently looking to transition out. And it's interesting what you said about the emotional, because she's gone from selling it all within 6 months, lock, stock and barrel, to selling 95% of it, and then it's going to I'll sell it in stages over the next few years. But the company my question therefore is, the company she's actually looking to sell to, for us, could be really good, because they're a much bigger company than she is, than the business that hers is. So strategically, it's one we really want to make happen, because they could really accelerate our growth in that territory. So from a buyer's perspective, any suggestions, advice, what to help her look more appealing, and ergo the relationship she's got with us? Any for that buyer? Any tips that you haven't already said that you would say I want to be thinking about?
Definitely one big one, which I haven't touched on so far, which is unusual for me, but we went down a different route so far. Competitive tension. It's the number one in my book. It's the number one commandment, and it's number one for a good reason. I found from experience over the last 20 years, you can drive up price by an average of 43% above what a P&L on a balance sheet might indicate is the financial accountancy value.
Yeah.
If you've got more than one buyer, if you're selling something, whether it's a business or whatever, if you've got more than one buyer, you can be in the driving seat, because you're creating competitive tension, and you've got choice, because not all buyers are the same.
Yeah.
So if you're looking to sell a business, don't, for goodness sake, just speak with one company. They might be the preferred bidder. They might be in pole position, and you may not have a list of half a dozen companies that also want to buy that business, but the perception that there's competitive tension is just as powerful as actual. So I think a mistake that a lot of business sellers do, which is why it's only 1 in 5 in this country sell. One of the key reasons is they're only talking with one interested party, and that's wrong, because that's what a buyer. I know when I've been on the buy side recently, I didn't want competition. I just wanted exclusivity, so I could chip on price and terms.
Yeah.
So I mean, that would be a key thing that she should be doing, is looking for alternative bidders for the business, and then weave that in gently and intelligently into a conversation with the people that you've mentioned, because that will have an upward impact on price and also improvement on terms that they were thinking of giving.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah, brilliant.
Thanks, Nigel. Adrian, have you got a question?
Yeah, and like others, a couple of observations, and we are a firm of accountants, so an M&A corporate finance does form part of the offering that we have for clients, and we sell several businesses and a year, and maybe our success rate is better because we're advising clients and we know those businesses and know and whether they are marketable, compared to some of the boutiques who, as you implied or said, Rob, there's a big sign-on fee, a monthly retainer, and unrealistic aspirations on price, fueled both by the owner but also the boutique, which I think does damage to the sector, and we've had to undo a damage that those organisations have done to clients in the past. So I do agree with you that you've got to be realistic on price. You've got to manage those clients' expectations. You've also got to, as you rightly said, do the preparation, because you may need to do some tax planning, another area that we obviously do. and restructuring as part of a transaction, because you may be looking to sell part of a business as opposed to the whole. And one of the dangers of a sale of a business is the sale becomes the focus of the and owners, and the business slips, creating the opportunities, as you say, to chip a price because the forecasts that are delivered don't match up to the actuals. And the management team need to retain the focus on the business, and the owner does, during the process. Otherwise, it can be inexpensive. So all the points that you've made, I agree with. One area you've not particularly picked up upon is the level of MBOs, which is obviously another alternative buyer. Even if you're in a competitive pitch situation, you could have a third party buyer, but also the management team can also, with the right finance or vendor assisted opportunities, create a buyout team. And I wonder whether you've got any thoughts or comments on that as a particular opportunity.
Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, it's a really important area that you raise, Adrian. Yeah, MBOs as opposed to MBIs. So obviously the difference is the current management team buying out the current owner as opposed to an external, an MBI where it's comes out from outside of the business buying in. Often I find that management team or managers, senior managers like the idea of having shares, but they don't want the risk. And they don't have the money. Now you can get it, as you touched on, Adrian. You can get external funding, but it seems to be for most employees, managers, and directors, it seems to be a foreign area for them. Arguably, they're the best placed people to buy the business from the current owner because they know it warts and all. Where we've had potential MBO, internal interest in buying out, we've put in our process, we've put that management team, they're just one interested party out of 7. And so they've got to make a competitive bid. And the reality is, usually it goes to an external entity, a trading business where 1 and 1 could equal 3 or 4 or 5. But it's not bad news for the management team. So I've tended to educate the directors that are not shareholders that this could be great news if there's another company that comes and buys the one that you're currently working in, because what the incoming new owner wants is to retain you as the senior team. And so that could be a combination of enhanced salary, bonus, equity, share options. You're in a very strong position as an MD, albeit that you're not a shareholder. So I tend to find that those people in situ tend to end up with a minority stakeholding in Newco. So they don't take on the risk. They don't have to raise funding, but they are benefiting from an acquisition from externally.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Alex, have you got a question for Rob?
Hi, morning. Yeah, I do. So I run a marketing agency, and I found from talking to lots of people that agencies can be quite difficult to sell. So I'm interested in some advice, perhaps from both of you, about how you can get service-led, some people-centric businesses like mine to be more attractive to buyers further down the line. We're not looking to sell now, but 5-10 years down the line, we'll be looking to. Is it simply great systems, processes, people, good client book, and the brand? Or is there something more nuanced that we could be doing now to put into train to think about this for 5-10 years time? Thanks.
It's not just marketing. Marketing, PR, that whole area is renowned for being trickier than most to sell businesses in that sector, but not exclusively. It's where it's people related. And so one tip I would pass on is to ensure that you don't hold any significant client relationships as the owner. If you can square that circle, and that again goes back into the area talking about with Rory, if you can skill up people to take on that role, that you're not involved with the client relationships. It's not your phone that goes on a Sunday morning, mobile phone that goes when there's a client's got an issue. It's actually one of your staff that they write, senior member of staff. That then makes, going back to what I said earlier, you've kind of made yourself redundant from your own business, which is what you want, particularly in a serviced, people-led business. You don't want to have the relationships. Sometimes, as I say, sellers don't always tell the truth in front of a buyer. And sometimes they say to buyers, the business runs itself, John, Alex, business runs itself. And then the acute buyer says, well, how comes when I looked at your website yesterday that on the team, you're at the top? You've got all you're hoisted by your own petard. So you're saying one thing, but actually when I look at your own website, you are fundamental to the business. So I think it would be a great thing. We all fall into this trap. I've done it myself. Take yourself off the website. Not tomorrow, but transition away from that, so that what you're doing is you're showcasing the team's skills, abilities, and capabilities, not yours as the owner or your fellow partners. Is there anything else you'd add from your perspective, Rory?
Yeah, from my perspective, there's just an element of differentiating yourself from others, which is an element I've been through, because when I started, there were sort of people just thought we're a learning development business, and a sort of a small boutique consultancy, which Rory Underwood does, and so establishing what my actual proposition was as a sales stroke product proposition was fundamental to me, so that it enabled me to be able to scale my business up. Because if it's always me, people just want me to do stuff. So people always want you, Alex, to do all the marketing stuff for us. Well, how do you scale that up? You can't. So that's one of the first things that I had to do. And secondly, 100% agree with Rob. Every single business leader, owner, or whatever, I challenge. I always say, what's your role as a CEO, as an MD, whatever? I would say, do yourself out of a job. Build a quality team around you, so that enables you to make that exit from a business. And this doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. I'm going through the process. I've got a proposition I use now that I'm strengthening all the time and creating IP, as well as developing a strong management team, even though I'm still a small business, such that I'm creating the sort of building blocks, such that when the time is right, that I can exit stage left if I want to, or not. I must admit, as Rob said very early on, whatever retirement looks like. And I must admit, I'm not of the, from my generation, because I'm one of the older ones there, but the generations beforehand, it was you work, retire, and then death was definitely one of the next things on the list. For some certain roles, it was like virtually imminently. But I'm actually getting to the stage where I'm thinking, when I retire, I can go and do what I want to do, which is still work in the business, pick what I do, go and sit in the sun for 3 months, come back, do some more work, but have the choice to choose, not necessarily just depart. But everybody's different how it does. So some of those things will make it easier to try and disengage 100%.
Just to underline what Rory said there, really important point. It took me 3 years to transition. So I got my MD in to replace me in my life. I've got 4 businesses now, and I don't run any of them day to day. But the largest one, and the one that I diluted from last year, that was 3 years of me transitioning, getting the MD and the sales director in place. And actually, it's a really pleasant few years, because I've still got the equity, I'm still deriving an income, but I'm not doing most of the work. And it's a lovely place to be. You could even go part-time, Alex, in that scenario. Fancy that, working 2 days a week and earning more than you're earning now. What a wonderful world. And it might be, Roy mentioned it might be that you decide never to sell your business, because actually you still quite like it. This is a really good income asset. It's producing an income for you, but you're not having to work in it 90 hours a week anymore. and you may decide to keep it. It's a really good pension and something you can control.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That's really great. Thanks, guys.
Chris, so you asked the question about blockchain, was that it?
Yeah, just trust and blockchain, really.
Sorry, you got garbled there. Just remind me what the question was again.
Well, how important is blockchain in the sale of a business?
I know nothing about blockchain, so
I would echo that. I know very little more than very little. It's not, in the 20 years I've been selling businesses, it's not come up at all. That's not to say that it won't in the future, but it's not an area. It's not an area I'm that au fait with. I'm certainly don't have detailed knowledge, and it hasn't affected the day-to-day mergers and acquisitions yet. I have been offered cash in a suitcase in a hotel years ago, so which is the other end of it. But no, I've got no experience of blockchain. I dare say that's how sale proceeds could be paid, rather than through solicitors' clients' accounts and bank accounts, but not seen it emerge yet.
No, I suspect it will be in the future. I mean, all the different cryptocurrencies, I suspect, but I'm still, yeah. Queen's head on it.
Honest,
there you go.
Sorry, guys, I'm still in the dark about blockchain, but it's on the horizon, I think. And yeah, and for me, it's all about trust blockchain. That's what it's all about. And as you said, a sale of a business is all about trust.
Yeah, it's having confidence in. Confidence is another word I hear a lot, especially with currencies. Whether the value goes up and down because of the confidence by whoever's wanting to buy it or not, and how countries are doing. So I suspect it's very much similar. But yeah, I'm on the edge of my envelope.
Snap.
And finally, Gary. Then, how are you, mate? You all right? You dropped off to sleep, Gary.
I'm all good, thanks, Rory.
Oh, just about heard something, Gary, but you're broken. Can you ping something through on the chat if you can, or just say you're okay?
Yeah, no, I'm
because
all
I'm
good,
conscious.
Rory.
I'm conscious of time. I'd like to wrap up now.
He said he was
Yeah,
all
I'm all
good.
good, thanks, Rory.
Did somebody hear him to say crack on? Yeah, okay. Right. Well, look, can I thank everybody for appearing? Several people have had to go, and I've just overrun by 7 minutes. But I think that's because lots of people have very interesting questions to ask of Rob. So for those who are still here, can I thank you all very much for attending today? I hope you found it interesting and thought-provoking. And next time we have the next one, I'm going to ask you, Laura, when's the next one? In July, isn't it?
Yes, the next one is the 12th of July, the online session. So all the details will be going on the website this afternoon.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you very much. So once again, if you are looking to sell your company or looking at doing things, I wish you all the very best. Those who know, good to hear and see you. And I look forward to catching you all very much soon again. So everybody, thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day and also the bank holiday weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks, Rory. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, everyone.
You're welcome.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.